Hello, my name is Leroy Blevins. Welcome to Mysteries and Histories. In this episode here, what I'm going to do is talk about some eyewitness accounts in the JFK assassination, which I'm going to make a video on this, which is called Jean Hill. And then there's another video I'm going to make after this, which is about the Babushka lady story. Okay, and it's about Bellevue Oliver and her story. Okay, now the reason why I'm making these two videos and stuff like that, I want to show people what I do here to see if these people are telling the truth or not. Because if their story does not match in what we see and what actually took place that day, then we know it never happened. So they're just telling a story just to get their names in the record book, in history books and everything else. Okay. When I started doing my investigation, my research into JFK assassination, before I got films, copies of films and everything else and all this other stuff, I started listening to all these interviews, going over eyewitness accounts and everything else and reading testimonies and stuff. And I noticed that things change, just like we hear about with Jean Hill. Jean Hill says some things that, change over the years as well. Just like when her first interview, her and Mary Mom was together, and she says, I didn't see where the shots came from. And then years later, she says, well, I see where the shots came from. They came from the grassy knoll. Okay, so I got 3 audios of her in her interviews. You can hear it in her words, not my words. One of them is just a small little clip that shows at the beginning when she says she didn't see where the shots came from, and then she's seen where the shots came from. Then there's going to be another video clip, which is about from the Maury Povich show when he first started, where he interviewed Jean Hill. And then she gives her testimony of what took place that day and stuff. And then there's another clip that we're going to listen to, where Jean Hill had an interview 7 hours after the assassination of JFK. And the reason why I want to show you these and play these is so you can understand the reason why I don't believe in her story. And I'm going to point out some other facts as well too, that she also tells in her story as well. So first, we're going to pull up the first clip, which is all you're going to hear is her say, I didn't see where the shots came from. That was from 1963. Then 1980, she goes, I see where the shots came from.
I didn't see any person fire the weapon.
I definitely saw the man shooting from the knoll.
I didn't see any person fire the weapon.
I definitely saw the man shooting from the knoll.
I didn't see any person fire the weapon.
I definitely saw the man shooting from the...
See, she didn't see the person firing the weapon. Then she says, I did see. Okay, so again, she changed her story. Now we're going to listen to a clip that she done in 7 hours after the assassination back in 1963.
This is Mrs. Jean Hill of Dallas. Could you tell us what you saw?
Yes, Mary and I had come down to see the president this morning, and we tried to get a place where we could be away from everyone, and I guess, succeeded as the car came down the hill toward us. He was on our side of the street, and the president and Mrs. Kennedy were in the back seat. They had a little dog between them looking at it, and just as the car came right in line with us, the president looked up, and just as he looked up, 2 shots rang out, and he grabbed his chest, and this real odd look came over his face, and he pitched forward onto her lap. And she jumped up over him at that and screamed and said, my God, he's been shot. And there was just...
Now, as you heard, I'm going to stop there for a moment. As you heard, she said that she heard the 2 shots, but this is directly in front of her. She heard 2 shots, and the president bring his hands up to his chest, and he falls over into his wife's lap. Okay, that's what she's telling us right now. And then she also said they was looking at the dog that was in between them as well. Okay, she said the limo was right on her side, which everybody knows when we watch the films and images and everything else. We know JFK's limo was in the center of the street because there's a 3-lane street there. He was actually in the center because you have police vehicles on one side, police vehicles on the other side. Okay, so he wasn't close to that curb. Okay, but she says he was close to the curb.
An instantaneous, sort of an instant's pause, and in the motorcade it momentarily halted, and 3 or 4 more shots rang out, and they sped away real quickly. And By that time, I became aware of Mary tugging on my foot saying, "Get down, they're shooting," and it hadn't registered. I'd been so busy looking at the president.
You were in a very advantageous spot to see the president.
To see the president, but also to get shot.
How do you feel now? It's been several hours later. You've talked to the police. You've given your story several times. Do you still believe that something like this really did happen to you?
I don't think I ever could have believed it unless I had actually seen it. And when I saw the look come across his face, I knew that he'd been hit. But I don't think I could have believed it if I hadn't been right there and hadn't seen it.
Well, you're going to have to talk to the FBI now, and I understand you have some home chores as well.
Breakfast dishes and
Okay, I'll stop it there because they just talk about her doing breakfast dishes, and then they talk about what everybody else is doing breakfast dishes as well. But as you heard that, okay, he says, I guess you got, now this is 7 hours later after the assassination, and he's having this interview with Jean Hill, and then he sit there and tells her, well, I guess you got to talk to the FBI now, which this was 7 hours after the assassination. But in her story, she says, well, she was taken in this room right after the assassination, and they told her you only heard the 3 shots because even in here, in this interview, she says she heard 2 shots first, then she heard 3 or 4 shots. Okay, so see, her story is changing right there because now we're looking at 7 hours after, so she's claiming there were 6 shots fired that day, 5 to 6 shots, I'm going to say. And she's saying that the limo is close to her, and then she's going to sit there and say that they had a dog there, and then, you know, she hasn't even been did an investigation with the FBI yet because the FBI didn't get her testimony. Okay, so we have to take this into consideration. We have to keep this in mind. Now, the next clip I'm going to play is from the Maury Povich show, and you're going to hear him and you're going to hear her talking about what happened that day. This was done in the 80s.
Comes the motorcade.
It was just, we got caught up in it, and I dashed out to the edge of the street, and I started to touch the car, and you just don't do things like that, and I yelled, "Hey, Mr. President."
And your friend had a
Polaroid.
Had a Polaroid camera, and she wanted to take pictures.
Right.
So when you yelled to the president, "Hey, Mr. President, we're over here,"
Yeah.
she's taking pictures.
She's taking pictures.
And then what happened?
And just as he started to turn and look at me, and his hand came up, I thought to wave, and all of a sudden the shots rang out, and he grabbed his throat. And it was just horrible. There was a series of shots, and I saw this flash of light and the puff of smoke from the knoll in front of us.
Where, by the way, the Warren Commission says nothing ever took place.
Oh, I saw it.
You saw that puff of smoke.
Oh, I did.
You know something happened
I
at the
know
knoll.
someone was shooting from there.
How far would you say you were from that car?
Oh, at one time I could have touched the car.
When it happened, how far were you?
I had jumped back up on the curb just a little further than I am from you.
You were this close to the president?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Comes the motorcade.
Okay, now that was from the Maury Povich show. Now, as you see, she says again that she was real close where she could touch the limo. Okay, just like if you watch the interview, she's sitting here like this, and Maury Povich is right here, right next to her. Okay, this is basically how close she says she was to JFK's limo. Okay, like I said, there's things when she tells her story time and time again. You go from 1963 when it first happened till, you know, earlier on in life, you know, later in life, I should say. It changes and changes. Okay, just like this image here is one this is from that interview that she did in 1963, as the one you just heard. This is where that image is from. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out some facts here. Okay, now in her story, she says she's seen where the shots came from the grassy knoll. She also says she could touch the limo. She was that close. Basically, she's only this far from basically Maury Povich. So she was this close. She was this close. So now we're going to watch the Zapruder film. And we're going to see how close Jean Hill was to JFK's limo. We're going to see if Jean Hill was actually looking at JFK. Watch. This is what we're going to go with frame. We're going to start with frame 286 all the way to 314. Okay, as you see here, this is frame 286 of the Zapruder film. Now, I want to show you something. And this is why I said, when I hear the testimonies, and I heard the interviews and stuff, and then I watch these films and images, things that they tell you does not match up and does not line up. So what are they telling the truth? First off, we know that Mrs. Kennedy and JFK did not have no dogs with them. She claimed they was holding a dog, but there was no dog with them. But now let's watch. There's Gene Hill coming in. As you see right here. Watch right here. This is 286. 287 of the Zapruder film. We're now just starting to see Gene Hill. Now, I'm going to zoom in right here for a moment. Think so. Right here. We can see the curb right here. Gene Hill is exactly about 3 to 4 feet away from the curb at this point. Okay. Now, here's where JFK's head exploded. We still see a part of Gene Hill's arm right here. This is frame 313. But I want to show you something. I'm going to go back here now. I'm going to show you something. Okay, now we know that Gene Hill was actually not in the street as she claimed. We also know she did not touch the car whatsoever. And we see her 3 to 4 feet away from the curb in the grass area. So when we look at this, we're going to put this on map now. We got a map. Before we go any further, I'm going to show you. This is where JFK's limo was at the time where he had a shot, okay, through his throat and stuff, as they're passing Mary Mormon and Gene Hill, okay? This is the location of JFK's limo. Now, she said that JFK's car was close to her and she could touch it, okay? She could touch it. And we could see by the Zapruder film, she is actually about 3 to 4 feet back in the grass area, which brings her from here's the curb, right here's the curb. We bring her back in this location right here. And we know this is a 3-lane road here because we got JFK's limo in the center with 2 motorcycles on this side and 2 motorcycles on that side. That's why JFK's limo was always in the center. That is exactly 13 feet away from Gene Hill, Mary Mormon. So Gene Hill was not next to the limo as she claimed. She could not touch that limo. First, now they don't have no dog with them. We know that. Now we know that she wasn't that close to the vehicle as she claimed. Okay, there's 2 things that's not even coming up in her story. Now we're going to watch something else. That first thing I captured, and I looked when I first seen this, when I first got this film, and I had my notes down, and I had to look at Gene Hill. Okay, because I had to watch her motions and see if she was actually doing things that she said she was doing. And that's how I know that she wasn't close by the vehicle as she said and everything else, because I had all these in notes. Now I want to show you this. Okay, here's Gene Hill. Where's she looking at now? She's actually looking over here. Okay, and this is frame 292 of the Zapruder film. All of a sudden, 296, she turns her head, but not to see JFK's limo. She turns it over this way, looking back behind JFK. What you see here, she's not facing JFK no more. This is frame 297. She is now looking back here. She's looking at the motorcycle cop. She's looking at the police officer that's on the motorcycle. Now watch. Here's the next frame. This is frame 298. Okay, this is 15 frames before JFK's fatal headshot. She's not even looking at JFK. Here she is right here. This is Gene Hill right here. Mary Mormon is pointing her camera at JFK, as you see here. But Gene Hill is looking over here. She's looking this way. If you watch my cursor, she's looking this way. Okay, I'm down here. It's like she's looking at me because she's actually looking at a police officer. But she's not even looking at JFK at this point. And this is frame 298 of the Zapruder film. Here's 299. Here's 300, 301, 302, 303. Here's 10 frames less from the fatal headshot. And where is Jean Hill looking at? She is still looking at this officer because he's starting to come. I know I'm right here in this section over here. But Jean Hill is now looking over at the police officer on the motorcycle. She is not even paying attention to JFK at this point. See, we don't even see her waving in her as she says, "Hey, Mr. President." I was watching the president. Okay. She's not even looking at the president. Here's frame 303 of the Zapruder film. Okay. 10 more frames later, JFK gets his fatal headshot. So how can she see anybody in a grassy knoll area? Because she's too busy keeping an eye on the cops, on the police officers, on the motorcycles. As you see here, she's still looking, as we see right here, which I'll shrink it a little bit right here, so you can see, and I'll zoom in. Here's Jean Hill. Here's the police officer right here that she's looking at. Not the first one, the second one. She's looking directly at that police officer. And this is frame 305 of the Zapruder film. And she's not even looking at JFK. She is looking at this police officer on the motorcycle because he's just now coming into frame. She is actually paying attention to the police officer. And here's frame 306, 307, which now she's frame 307. She's looking directly at, as you see, she's looking directly at this officer right here. This is where she's looking at. This is what she's concentrating on. This is what she's paying attention to, is the police officer in the motorcade. JFK is already passed. As you see here, she's looking over here. JFK is already way past her right here. Frame 308, 309, 3010. This is 3 frames before the fatal headshot. And she's looking directly at this officer right here. That's who Jean Hill's looking at, this officer right here. She's not looking at JFK. Remember, JFK is way over here. Like I pointed out, JFK is way over here. She's not even looking that direction. She's looking directly at this officer right here on the motorcycle. And then the shot's fired. And as you see here, this is frame 312. Jean Hill is looking directly at this police officer. We can see her right here looking directly at this police officer right here. This is the man that she was looking at right here. Because she said her boyfriend was in a motorcade. He was one of the officers. He was in a motorcade. She's looking directly at this police officer right here. She's not even paying attention to JFK. So how can she see? Because JFK is way over here. But she's looking directly, as I pointed out, she's looking directly at this officer here. And then we have the fatal headshot to JFK. So how's she going to see where that shot came from? She can't. Because like I point out right here, this is frame 305. She's not even looking at this frame 305, this Zapruder film. She's not even looking at JFK. She's looking over here. Next frame, she's looking at this police officer right here. He's directly right in front of her. That's what she's looking at because Kennedy's still way over here. But she's looking right at this police officer right here, and this is frame 310, as I point out in the film. So when she was viewing, when she was watching, when we zoom in, okay, the fatal headshot happened right here in this location here, if you watch my cursor. By the time JFK's limo comes down this way, she's concentrating on right here. That's where Jean Hill is looking at right there. I mean, that's where Jean Hill, excuse me. Jean Hill is looking at this officer right here on this bike. That's what she's concentrating on. She's looking at the officer. She did not see JFK. She wouldn't even bother seeing JFK because JFK right here was already shot here. But as you notice, JFK, by that point, he was already like this because JFK was shot back here, right here. He started doing this. She wasn't even paying attention because she was too busy looking at this cop. And if you see in this Zapruder film, she's actually smiling at the police officer that was driving by. I want to make this video here to point out some facts, okay? Just like here's another facts I want to show out here too. Okay, with her standing right here, all right, that's hillside. She's not even looking up the hillside because she'd be looking up like this if she was looking at the hillside. But she wasn't. She was looking straight at the police officer right here that was close by her. That's who she was looking at the whole time, as I point out in films and images. This is why I do not believe in her story, okay? And a lot of researchers out there will base their evidence and their research on her story, but her story is false information. So I eliminate her as an eyewitness. Okay, this is what you would do in a court of law. You have somebody sitting there and making testimony saying they seen the assassin, they seen the gunman up there on the grassy knoll, he was taking a shot. I've seen the puffs of smoke and stuff. But then when you watch the films and stuff, and you see her not looking at President Kennedy, she's looking back at behind the vehicle and looking at the officer. Okay, that's going to blow it all up portion, because first I didn't see where he came from, which you're going to hold that. If you bring that all this stuff in a court of law, they're going to sit there and put her down as a liar, because they're going to say, first, you said you didn't see where the shots came from, then you see where the shots came from. You said the president and Mrs. Kennedy had a dog with them. They didn't have a dog. Okay. You said you was close enough to touch the vehicle. You couldn't have been that close to touch the vehicle because you wasn't allowed to, because you got 13 feet in between from where you was at and where the limo was at. Then you're going to sit there and say you was keeping an eye on the president the whole time. You was watching the president the whole time. When you was sit there, and it can be seen in the Zapruder film, you can see you was staring at an officer that was on a motorcycle on the side of the limo and in back of the limo. Okay, all these points. This is the reason why I do not believe in her story. This is why I want to make this video, so people know this information as well. Okay, because I'm getting a lot of emails from people and a lot of stuff from people saying, well, you have to believe this person's story because they said this and they said that. Okay, that's why I want to make this video here. I'm going to make the one about the babushka lady, which is Beverly Oliver, as so-called claim Beverly Oliver. And I'm going to show you it points out that their story does not match. So if their story does not match and what we see and what really took place that day, then it's a false information that they're giving to people. And researchers are being fooled by these false claims and these false research. Okay, so now they're in the middle of, well, who's telling the truth now as well? So I wanted to make this video here, and I'll make another video. I'll make another video after this one. But I just wanted to put more in there and show people why I don't believe in the Gene Hill story. Okay, because of all these facts that we can see in the films and what we hear and what we can see is totally different than what she's saying. Okay, so that's the reason why I do not believe in her story. So don't forget to tell your friends about us. Don't forget that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Share this video with other people so they know this information. Share it on social medias and stuff like that. And thank you, and you'll have a pleasant day.